Has modern bourbon lost its way? Come with me as we compare Stagg Junior Batch 12 to the latest release in 24A. Which one will be the favorite? Let's find out. For the purposes of this head-to-head, Batch 12 is going to be on this side, in the Amongst the Whiskey glass. And Batch 24A will be on this side, in the Buckhead Bourbon glass. I put the damn sticky side. I wrote on the wrong side of the sticky note, so I had to fold it to make it stand out. So Batch 12 rings in at a cool 132.3 proof, and Batch 24A rings in at 127.6. Let's have ourselves a tasting. Okay, up first, I will give you my notes on the new batch, 24A. Holy barrel funk, Batman. Yeah, really rich, woody, funky barrel funk tones. If you've ever been deep into a rick house in Kentucky, that's what this smells like. Ooh, it's a little bit boozy, almost like a strawberry daiquiri, and there's a good bit of black pepper sitting underneath that. Pretty nice in the nose, nothing too groundbreaking. Doesn't feel super complex. Yeah, with all that barrel funk, it feels just a little bit one-noted for me. And moving on to compare the nose on Batch 12. Ooh, so that's a more subtle wood funk. It's got a light creme brulee. It's got a sweetness to it, like those candied peach rings. Cherry skins. Right off the bat, definitely more complex than the 24A. Yeah, deep inhales on this. I mean, you can see the smile spread across my face with this. That smells great. Caramel, just classic bourbon. Really well-aged bourbon, too. Oh yeah, I get some old leather tones. It's almost starting to turn into that, like, rattan, chair caning material. Just, like, hyper-aged. The kind of notes that I get out of George T. Stagg. That is a phenomenal nose. And a quick trip back to 24A here. Yeah, just so much flatter. Still very one-dimensional. Two-noted. I know if I spent a lot more time with this, I could probably find some more interesting notes. And if you are interested in the more patient observation of Stagg Junior, make sure you check out my website reviews at amongstthewhiskey.com. Much longer form written reviews than I present here in video. Yeah, so quick head-to-head on the nose here. Absolutely no competition. The Batch 12 is significantly better on the nose. Overall, the Batch 12 is just well balanced, good aroma. Feels like it has some good age to it. It's definitely the one that is luring me into a sip. That said, let's have a sip. I'm going to start with 24A because it's a lower proof. Okay. Some good sweetness on that. Here today, it leads with a little bit of cherry skin, caramel, molasses, brown sugar. The way it sits on the tongue is very low. Kind of this moody, brooding, rumbling like a distant thunderstorm will almost do. Yeah, it's moody like a rainy day. 24A is rainy day whiskey. Okay, another sip. Lands rather tame for Stagg Junior. It does have your classic Buffalo Trace sweetness to it. Leans in on those caramel tones. But the finish is a little bit short for me. I'd call it maybe short to medium. A lot of that brown sugar bubbles up during that linger. Okay, I'm going to save a little bit of this so I can come back to it. On to Batch 12. Sorry, after a palate cleanse. Which, by the way, high mineral water, like Gerolsteiner, I'm not sponsored by Gerolsteiner, I just love it, is like a squeegee for your palate. You should try it. They have a glass bottle version of this, but the plastic bottle version is much cheaper and has this neat little feature where the cap stays attached to the neck so you never lose it. Looks kind of dumb when you sip it, but whatever. Yep, good rinse and swish. Make sure that the palate is fully reset for the comparison to Stagg Junior Batch 12. If you ever see somebody doing a comparative tasting, by the way, and they don't sip water in between the sips of whiskey, those whiskeys are intermingling and playing off each other. That head-to-head, in my opinion, is a little bit hard to interpret, especially if they're offering tasting notes. So with all that said, now we are on to Batch 12. Let's go. Oh my god, that is good fucking bourbon. Yeah, if you haven't read my full review of Batch 12, I'm gonna need you to go do that now. My goodness, I'm getting like full body chills. Just one sip of this whiskey is enough to tell me this is the far superior bourbon. Absolutely no competition. These whiskeys are playing in completely different leagues. Now, I know this is a 5 out of 5 because I've fully tasted this before many times, but honestly, this reconfirms my score. This is a 5 out of 5 whiskey. Batch 12, bravo. Now, Batch 12 was the summer 2019 release. The odds of you finding this batch now are slim to none. So I'll do my best to try to give some color here if I think Batch 24 is worth buying, is worth chasing, and maybe lend some color to that original question that I've asked. Has modern bourbon lost its way? Oh, right. I should probably offer some of the tasting notes that I'm finding on this. Okay. Undeniably sweet, but so well balanced. I get plum, raspberry, these dark Michigan cherries. There's this underlying creme caramel that is just mwah, chef's kiss. Now, I self-identify as a Stagg man, and that is because of batches like Batch 12. This is just phenomenal. High proof, but not overly hot whiskey. It drinks so flavorful. The way the flavors just roll over the tongue with such beauty and grace. This is what bourbon is all about. Look at me, I can't stop sipping this thing. I find some strawberry tones on this, cinnamon coffee cake, a little bit of that leathery characteristic that reminds me of George T. Stagg for sure. And then in this underlying linger, I find this nice little like pancake sweet tone. But really what's amazing about this pour is how everything is just tied up perfectly with a little bow on. Like I said before, mwah, chef's kiss. Okay, and now back to the main event. We gotta compare this to 24A, of course. Another sip. After my palate cleanse, that almost felt like sacrilege to clear my palate of Batch 12 because it was just, the linger was still smoldering, still going so strong and so delicious. Okay, but for real, back to 24A. Compared to Batch 12, this is boring. No competition. If you told me it would cost me $250 to drink the Batch 12, I would do that 10 times versus buying a single batch 24A at $60. Don't care. I would much rather drink at whatever the cost, whatever reasonable cost. I would much, much, much rather spend my fresh palate on high quality whiskey. So if you are like me, a long-term whiskey enthusiast, a lot of experience tasting, maybe I've had hundreds of whiskeys. I've probably had thousands of whiskeys. And to me, Batch 12 is amongst those pinnacle whiskeys. Those rare, rare, rare 5 out of 5s. Almost no whiskey earns a 5 out of 5 for me. And when it does, you should be paying attention. Batch 12 is that whiskey. Batch 24A, take it or leave it for me. I really am not going to be looking for a backup of this, even at full-blown MSRP, $60, $70. I think there are tons of whiskeys in this kind of quality bracket. I would give this a slight nod over your shelf staples, but honestly, I wouldn't feel bad mixing 24A with ginger ale and enjoying it that way. What I think that means for 24A is that maybe they're targeting a more everyday consumer. Maybe they're targeting not the whiskey enthusiast, because the whiskey enthusiast at this point likely has bottle fatigue. I mean, if you're like me, you've got a lot of Stagg Junior batches. I probably have 20 or 30 bottles of Stagg Junior on hand. Does this one, 24A, stand out amongst those 20 or 30 bottles? Absolutely not. But it's also not a dud. It's not the worst batches that I've had. It's not the liquid magma that I got out of batch 13, which I did not like. But in the grand scheme of things, I think this falls somewhere in the middle of the quality scale for Stagg Junior. Conveniently enough, I have an article published that highlights all of the Stagg Junior batches that I've tried and my power ranking of them. It's called the Stagg Hub. Give that a Google and see if it comes up. Okay, final thoughts on 24A. Here we go. My last taste validates exactly what I was feeling throughout this tasting. This is a middle-of-the-road Stagg Junior batch, and honestly one that I'm very happy to have been sharing with friends and family left and right. You can see my fill level on this bottle is already pretty low, and I just got this. But how I drink whiskey is with friends and family. It always tastes better shared, and that is especially true for Stagg 24A. I have no qualms sharing this with the most novice whiskey drinker because I do think it's very approachable. It drinks light and easy compared to the uber flavorful, super hot batches of old. So does 24A have a spot on my shelf? Absolutely. I'll be sharing this right on through. Expect to see this bottle empty pretty soon for me. I'm not going to hoard it. I'm not going to stack 22 of them on my shelf. I have plenty of great Stagg Junior batches. Unfortunately, 24A is just not one of them. Oh my goodness. But batch 12 is. You let me know down in the comments, is batch 12 the pinnacle batch? Do you think modern bourbon has lost its way? Interesting conversation starters. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the latest trends in all things Stagg. Until next time, my friends, I'm going to be sipping this batch 12. As always, sip it however you want. But I'm going to be drinking this batch 12 neat till the day I die. Until then, keep it amongst the whiskey, my friends.